Welcome back, Psych 250 students, for Chapter 7, Volume 2. Ooh, let's get into it. Last time we were talking about depression and grief. And so here's some information about grief-related reactions. When people would come in to me when I was a clinician for almost 20 years, they would come in and ask, how long will I feel this way? How long will I feel depressed? Due to the loss of, you could fill in the blank, a family member, significant other, a pet, whatever the case might be. And that answer is not always easy. Sometimes I would say, how long you got? Because just when you think you're over the loss, a birthday comes up, an anniversary. You pass by a place where you would frequent with that other individual. Something reminds you of that person, a song, you name it, and all the feelings would come back. So having some depressive symptoms is pretty normal for the grief process, feeling sad and so forth. But generally, that stuff softens over the years. If it doesn't, then we know we've got a problem. Definitely. How common are depressive disorders? Pretty common. People generally assume that they're the only ones that are going through this, but then usually this happens in class, and I ask how many people know someone who's dealt with depression in any form or fashion, and a lot of hands go up. A lot of us have dealt with that. So what do we do? How do we counter depressive symptoms when we just can't seem to snap out of it? And usually people around us have really good intentions. They'll say things like, just snap out of it. Just be happy, and it'll all go away. Well, if it was that easy, we would snap out of it. We would just change our mindset, but it's not that easy. Biochemically, there's something going on with this. I'd love to stop being a diabetic just by thinking I will stop being a diabetic. But it doesn't happen that way, right? Oh, the mind's pretty powerful. But sometimes we need a little help with our neurotransmitters. So keep in mind that depression does run in the family. So never tell your mom or dad or grandpa or grandma that you never gave me anything, because it might have given you the genetic possibility that you might, in fact, develop depression. So what do? We treat substances that would change our levels of norepinephrine, serotonin, and dopamine. Watch your stress level. Watch your sleeping patterns. Take good care of yourself, especially when times are very stressful as they are these days, right? It'd be much better if we just spent some time together and we could interact in class, joke around, listen to some good music, and so forth. That one made my headsets fall off. Music is very subjective, as you know. But we have to watch the levels of stress, because guess what? There's a correlation between stress and the amount of depression that we experience. Increase the cortisol, you remember that substance, and our stress levels go up. It can even damage part of our brain, our hippocampus, which interferes with our ability to remember things, which is extremely important when it comes to education, deadlines, chapter notes, and papers, and watching videos, and so on and so forth. So it's all in your head. You can snap out of it. Doesn't really help us at all, right? People are fearful that if I get on antidepressant medications, I'm going to become a junk addict. I'm going to be hooked on this stuff. I'm going to suffer the consequences of this long-term dependence on medication. Well, I'm not going to lie to you and say, oh, well, you just take it and you'll feel better and you'll be off it instantly. Some people do have to take medication for long periods of time, maybe for the rest of their lives. But if it's a difference between walking around with a cloud following you to the sensation when you wake up and it's a beautiful sunny day, okay, occasional cloud is okay. Occasionally rain is okay. But that sunshine, you're Californians. We're used to that. We love that sunshine. Right? Who wants to go to Disneyland when it's pouring rain or freezing cold? Well, some of you do, but that's another story. It's going to mess with your circadian rhythms. If you recall that, that can be disruptive to your sleep, and in particular, feed right back into your bad feelings of depression. Right? In Michigan, there was 1 year, with the exception of some town in Alaska, some parts of Michigan had the least amount of sunlight. So when I was working at Michigan State University, we had an incredible number of students coming to a clinic where they can get light treatment to counteract their feelings of seasonal affective disorder. In other words, their mood was altered by the lack of sunlight. As soon as spring came along, those students stopped coming to the clinic. They felt better. They were getting the natural rays of sunshine, so they didn't need the special light treatments. So you hear expressions like dark, gloomy day. That has some validity to statements like that, especially when people are feeling depressed. Our mood can alter our mindset, how we see the world. If you're a pessimist, then of course what's happening now is doom and gloom, and it's the end of the world, and we see the worst in humanity. Right? If you're an optimist, you're realistic, but you're also have a mindset of pointing out the positive aspects. I happen to be an optimist, so I saw a recent posting from a friend and colleague of mine who teaches at a different institution, and she showed some beautiful images. Another former student of mine showed some beautiful images, actually of a highway. In the background of the highway was some snow-covered trees. And the comment I made on her posting was, less traffic, less pollution, beautiful fresh snow, right? There's a lot of good stuff happening right now. It doesn't always make the front page news, obviously, or first thing that pops up on our phone as far as newsworthy. Cognitively, we get ourselves feeding into this wave of thinking, and some of this thinking has been programmed into us by people who haven't been very supportive of us. You're wasting your time going to school. It's not going to amount to anything. You're not going to succeed. You're not very smart. So therefore, why even try? And if we play that message over and over in our heads and we believe it, guess what? We're going to have a sense of helplessness. And that takes me to my case study today, one of my case studies, and it's Martin Seligman's concept of learned helplessness. What Seligman was interested in is, why do animals and also people learn to be helpless? In other words, we get this thinking, this mindset in our head that comes to the conclusion that no matter what we do, it will not make a difference whatsoever. You see this in people who refuse to vote, thinking, well, my vote's not even going to count. It won't change a thing. Well, how do you know? Unless you try to vote, unless you get involved, unless you speak your mind, unless you are proactive as opposed to passive. So, to summarize, and here goes some of my amazing drawings. I'll have to interpret what they are since a lot of people don't know what exactly I am drawing. Seligman set up an experimental condition where dogs were confined in the situation. They had an exit away from the apparatus they were in, but they were confined by a chain and they could not escape. And so what happened ultimately was these dogs were punished. They were given an electrical shock that was most discouraging. But they could not escape because they were chained down and they had to endure the shock. Then he changes the independent variable. Same subjects, in this case the dogs, same conditions, they're shocked, but you notice that the barrier has been taken away. The chains have been released. So what do you think happened when the dogs had an opportunity to escape and they were no longer confined? They were given the shock again, and what happens? They stay in place. They stay in place. They do not take advantage of their escape. He called that learned helplessness. The dog, because it was confined initially and shocked and attempted to escape, basically gave up, thinking there's nothing I can do to change the variables of my condition. Now, that theory was done with dogs. Obviously, you can't do an experiment like that with human beings. But people have looked at that concept and said, doesn't that sort of explain what goes on in some very destructive relationships? You're in that destructive relationship, and your friends are saying, get away from that person. Your partner treats you horribly. And the person doesn't leave. You can even stay at my house. I'll take care of you. Bring your kids with you if there's children. The person doesn't leave. And you think, what's going on there? Well, going back to learned helplessness, in their mindset, they believe there's nothing they can do to change the outcome of their situation. So therefore, they do nothing. Other people kind of give up on them and say, well, they must love torture. They must love to be in pain. I've given them an avenue of escape. They're just not taking advantage of it. But it's complicated when it comes to humans, right? I mentioned kids. It could be socioeconomic factors. Emotions are rather complex. We've talked about emotions, how it's possible to love and hate the same person at the same time. You can picture somebody strangling somebody and saying, I love you at the same time. That's weird, but humans are pretty strange if you think about it. So we have to consider the sociocultural dynamic when it comes to depression. Different people look at different avenues of trying to produce treatment issues. For example, the Chinese look at issues of weakness and tiredness or imbalance. So if they go see the herbalist, they're looking for chemical substances that can bring their body back into balance. There isn't this separation between mind and body. In Eastern culture, I know my sister-in-law just mentioned that she saw recently a curandero who put an egg all over their body, right, to heal them, to cure them. And she was quite surprised when I told her I was very familiar with that practice. And many of you are, in fact, familiar with that. There's something not quite right, what's going on. Native Americans, of course, is the origin for a lot of our practices of dealing with nature, balance, taking care of the mother's homeland. The earth is our mother, so to speak. And the way we treat the earth, we eat the products from the earth, and if they're unhealthy, then we're unhealthy. So again, one of the beautiful things I've seen lately is there's less pollution, right? Because there's less traffic, there's less manufacturing. Families are doing things together, going for walks, playing games. So it's not all doom and gloom. Let's talk about bipolar disorder. As soon as you hear bi, the first thing that comes to mind is bicycle, right? Two wheels. Bi meaning two. With bipolar, the old name being manic depressive illness, we've got a situation where a person can vary from one extreme emotion to the other, either within a few minutes, hours, days, or weeks. And I'm talking about like you say something like, I hate Spider-Man, and I get kind of annoyed, and I'm making a face, and I don't seem like I like you, but then 10 minutes later it's like, that's okay. That's all right. There's a lot of superheroes, you can like somebody else better. No, I'm talking about pretty drastic, extreme emotion. And there are a couple case studies I want to tell you about bipolar disorder. And I'll tell you on the next video. So stay tuned. Thank you so much for your attention. I appreciate it.